my name's Anna Serin. I'm Director of Listings Development with the Canadian Securities Exchange. I am joined today by my friend and colleague, Kendra Johnston. She is President and CEO of AME. She is joining us today as part of our Women in Mining series as part of PreDAC 2021, which of course we're doing virtually, Kendra, because we can't all be in the same room this year, which is so sad. Thank you so much for joining me today, Kendra.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you. It's not quite the same when we're not face to face, but nice to catch up nonetheless.
So I get the pleasure, and I think it's been a few years now, but I get the pleasure of sitting on the marketing and communication committee with AME. So I get to work with all of the lovely team at AME. You have such an amazing team. I'm always blown away just by the caliber of their expertise and background and general kindness, if I can say that.
Thank you. Thank you.
um,
I'm blessed to have a great team for sure, and just so passionate about the industry and what our members do.
You really, yeah, it's an amazing program, and we'll get into that. I want to start off by talking about you. You have quite a big background in the mining sector, and you've had quite the journey. So just tell us about you.
Sure, that's a very open-ended question. So I'm a geologist by training. I graduated from the University of Victoria, and I have spent my entire career working in mineral exploration, primarily in the gold space, and working mostly on the north side, on the west side of North America, through Nevada up into central British Columbia, and then spent many years working in the Yukon as well. But I also knew when I came out of school that fieldwork was a really important part of being a geologist and being in this space. And everybody needs to spend time in the field to really learn and get a feel for what this industry is all about and get the understanding. But I also knew very early on that I was never going to be a full-time field geologist for my entire career. I had a lot of interest on the business side of things, and really, was intrigued by mining deals and joint ventures and how that happened, and what the stock exchanges looked like, and even the fact that there was more than one stock exchange, things like that I didn't know coming out of school, but very quickly became intrigued. So spent a couple of years doing investor relations as well, and then got to dabble as sort of I grew up in the industry and moved more into corporate development type roles and project management. But when you work for a junior company, the beauty of that is the diversity that's involved in the role in your day to day. Every day is always different, and there's such great people in this industry, whether you're in the field and living that camp life with who become very quickly your adoptive brothers and sisters and field aunts and uncles, as it were. But also the camaraderie on the business side. We have a fantastic investor relations group of people here in Vancouver, and the camaraderie between them and how they help each other, within their own company programs and make those evolve is just so special. So I've been a jack of all trades, but it's also made me who I am and created the career that I've had. So it's been a lot of fun.
Now, I've heard amazing things about kind of the engineering and mining program at UVic, and so I know there's lots of amazing people in Canada that have started their roots there. What was it like, kind of when you first came out of school? What was it like to be in the field? You're obviously a young woman and out there in probably a bunch of different projects. What was that like for you?
Yeah, so my first role was actually with the BC Geological Survey, which was a phenomenal place to start. If people can start their careers working with the survey, it is such a great training ground. And the project I was on the north end of Vancouver Island. So, not the most remote place that I ever got to work for sure, but certainly an interesting place and a really good introduction into some of the community relations pieces. Introduction for me, who came from Toronto, was totally a city person, to understand working in small communities and that type of interaction as well. But working with the survey, small team, small crew, I think there were 5 of us. And a lot of time, luckily, with the head geologist who was in charge of the program. So, like I said, really, really great training grounds. But I quickly moved over to Vancouver and started working with a group down in Nevada, primarily in the field, but doing investor relations for them as well. And some of the time down there in the field was just amazing. I spent 2 weeks mapping on horseback in the northeast corner of Nevada, which was a pretty phenomenal experience. But I have to say I've always been really lucky with the teams that I've had, and the field crews that I've been with. I've had some fabulous mentors in this industry, but you know, everybody's had their issues as well. And being a young female, it's who rose relatively quickly, I became project manager for a number of projects quite early in my career, and taking that leadership role and trying to influence folks that have been in the field for many, many more years than I. Certainly some challenges around that.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to so many women. We did Mining Over Canada late last year, and I had the chance to interview so many women across the country. And I feel like that was a very similar sentiment. Just amazing experiences, amazing mentors, and every once in a while it was you know, you had to deal with
Tough
something.
moment.
Okay, the one thing I wanted to ask you, because I didn't realize kind of the jurisdictions that you were working in. One thing I will say about Nevada, I just saw a posting yesterday that it's been rated as, I think, the #1 safest jurisdiction in the world for the mining sector. I don't know if you saw that, but I know Nevada has just had a super rich history. Within the space, I interviewed a gentleman with Getchell Gold yesterday, Mike Sieb, he's president, CEO, president, and an issuer on our exchange. And he's focused down on Nevada and just said it's been an amazing experience. But what I wanted to ask you is, Nevada to the Yukon are two very different experiences. So I want to hear about both.
Sure. So I'm, excuse me, I'm probably more of a winter person. I didn't do super well in the desert environment. It turns out I'm also allergic to sagebrush. So Nevada was not the most fun for me.
Well, Kendra,
Um,
you and I have very similar skin tone, and I can only imagine what days in the sun I just become a lobster.
yes, me too. Me too. Yeah, yeah. So, long pants, long shirts, hats. Like I was covered head to toe working in the desert. So I was boiling hot every day down there. Um, but it's a very different place geologically, certainly to BC, and to the Yukon in some respects. I mean, there's a lot of similarities geologically, but from just a general environment perspective, Yukon's got some really large mountains, and just the topography of it is certainly a little bit different. So, there's some very basic differences just from driving, from an airport out to site, for example. But
And
you know,
it's year
when
round, right? I mean, you can technically,
is it what? Sorry.
is it year round that you can be operational?
It was year round down there, and it certainly was not in the Yukon. The Yukon was, the longest summer I think I did up there was 6 months, but that was pushing it big time.
That is pushing
You
it. Yeah.
4-month summers is much more reasonable. The other interesting thing about Nevada is that it's 24-hour work as well. So, or I'm sorry, Yukon is 24 hours.
Yeah.
Nevada generally only works day shift. So, they will work night shift if they have to, but they don't generally.
Is there a reason for that?
I never quite figured that out, and it wasn't really because I started my career there. It wasn't until I moved to working in BC and Yukon that I realized that was odd. So no, I've never really found a good answer for that, other than the fact that they do work, 24 or 12 months of the year. So,
Could that be why
um,
they're rated #1 as far as safety?
uh,
Or not
probably
safety,
not. I
but
think winter. I think nighttime drilling can be, it's relatively safe as well. So just the same as daytime drilling. So, but yeah, that was one of the big differences as well. But for me, it was the remoteness. When you're in Nevada, we were staying in houses and hotels and small communities, and when you're in British Columbia, that happens as well. But we also have some very remote places, central BC, and of course the Northwest, and then pretty much all of the Yukon. You're out in the wilds and in tents and living on mountaintops, or somewhere down in a valley close to water, so you can have water for the camp. And you got to think about all those things when you're out there. Where like, and that was probably one of the more interesting parts of being the project manager, is thinking about the camp and how you're going to set that up and what types of things you needed. And then, all of a sudden things become problems that, you never thought as a geologist you were going to have to deal with. So, things like making sure that the generator is running, and when it's broken, there's no service person coming to fix it. So, you got to figure it out. Or, the hot water tank. I had one summer where we broke 6 hot water tanks in a row in the Yukon. So we went about
oh no.
7 weeks without hot water of a camp of 15 people. It was it was not fun boiling water on camp stoves to, wash dishes and have makeshift sponge baths.
Well, and also, people have to realize the amount of difficult work that that you do up there. A cup of tea or a shower is pretty important at the end of that day.
Certainly makes your day. And I think, most camps, the conversation that keeps people going, especially when you're out in the field and hiking all day every day, is what's for dinner and
Yeah,
how great the cook is. And the importance of the cook and how fantastic they are is such an important aspect of camp.
that is not the first time I've heard that. I was going to ask about that when you're up in those remote places. You said 6 months was the longest you've done. I did a excuse me, a stint up in the Northwest Territories, actually, with a fishing resort one summer. And I think I did 2 months, but it felt like years. I mean, I can't even imagine 6 months up there. Um, what are the dynamics? What happens when there's this little core team of you in the middle of nowhere for 4 months? What evolves in that process?
That's such an interesting question. So I should clarify, 6 months is 6 months in 4 week long stints. So
Okay.
4 weeks in and 1 week out, just for safety reasons. The Yukon, I think it's 28 days you can spend in the field up there before you need to come out. And then you have to be out for 4 days. So, sort of that time period goes very quickly when it's break time and you're back in. But what happened? So we had a camp of 25 people for most of my time up there. Um, and really, when you hire your staff and you hire your team, it's so important to get the dynamics right. And that's everything from a good balance of people who are science focused versus people who are, extremely physically capable and dynamic in their abilities to get out, or their joy of getting out and digging holes and doing physical labor, to the balance of men and women in camp, and everything else in between. So it's a really neat dynamic. I mean, everybody goes through a bit of a curve that, there's the first week, the end of the first week is always a little bit difficult. And then you get over that hump and you're just fine for the next 2.5, 3 weeks. And then, those last 2 or 3 days in camp before your plane comes to take you out are usually pretty hard. I found for me, I never wanted to go to camp, but once I was in camp, I never wanted to leave. So it was a
That's
real
so interesting.
yeah, it was a real kind of push-pull for me. But some of my best friends in this industry are folks that I was in camp with.
I
And
bet.
I don't think that will ever change. And I can remember in some of my early days standing at booths at PDAC and looking at my boss saying, I can't wait until I'm your age and I know as many people as you do in this industry. And I feel like I'm nowhere close to being that age yet. I realize that, but it's still so much fun to see how many people that and that your network grows, and it grows so strongly because of those relationships that you gain in the field.
Absolutely. I've never had the pleasure of being in the field. I did get the opportunity late last year to do a helicopter ride up to a site with Clarity Gold, which was, a bucket list item. I must say it was amazing. But just kind of getting the feel of what your lives look like out there is just, it's so awe-inspiring what you guys do. And, the personality traits that you must all have to be able to work together. There's probably stuff that goes wrong all the time. Like you said, you can't just call a mechanic if something goes wrong. Everyone has to rally together. It's quite amazing what you guys do out there. Um, so you did Nevada, you went up to the Yukon. So you got both ends of the spectrum. You've never done any work in any difficult jurisdictions, though, right? You've kind of avoided that.
I have avoided most international jurisdictions, not necessarily on purpose. It's just not where the opportunities have come for me. I have worked pretty much everywhere from Ontario west, um, but all small dabblings of projects. Certainly the vast majority of my work has been Nevada, BC, and Yukon.
Yeah. And then you settled back down to Vancouver, you said. So that's where you kind of got into the more corporate development and kind of office, so to speak, out of the field side of things. So what caused that transition for you?
It was quite organic for me, actually. I mean, it was sort of always where my passion was. I did, through one of the last downturns, decide to go back and do an MBA at school. I did a full-time course load as well as work full-time, which was an incredible challenge, but lots of fun as well, and happy to say I survived. But that was a bit of a turning point and transition for me as well. Um, but to be honest, it was really quite organic. It was the fact that I was interested in those things. I picked up, random tasks as downturns started to happen, and learned how to, do some of the things that others in the office weren't maybe so interested in, and really, again, became that jack of all trades that was curious about all of those pieces and how they all fit together. So um, it was a bit of a survival tactic, and a bit of just a place that I really enjoyed being. But I think what I found I really truly enjoyed most was that project management side of things. And um, you know again, the craziness of it, like you said, nothing in camp is ever simple, and to be able to plan and project manage that is always a really intriguing challenge for me. And um, you know plan A never works, plan B usually doesn't work, plan C sometimes works, and you often get down to plan like K before something actually works. So it's about having all those contingencies. And when you're used to planning something like that, you know sort of expanding beyond that, you understand all of the pieces that go into it, from a permitting perspective and a policy perspective, and camp maintenance and HR, and the business dealings of when money is changing hands and when property payments are due, and all of those things plays a role in that project management piece. So you very quickly get the full gamut of what's involved in a project.
Well, and I guess you always get to be moving around. Your job is never the same each day, right?
Mm, yeah.
Okay, well, it's so interesting to hear about your past. Let's talk about AME. So you are president CEO of AME. It's an amazing organization. Why don't we start by just telling our audience what AME is?
Sure. So AME was founded in 1912. So it's got an extremely long history to it. But we are the lead advocacy association for all of the mineral explorers and developers who are based here in British Columbia or working in British Columbia. That's also representing people who are based here and working elsewhere. And our overall mission and goal is to protect and promote the interests of mineral explorers. So it's a very broad mission statement, but when you really sort of dig into that, there's only a few aspects that really come to fruition, and those few aspects are really quite broad. But it's everything from policy development to talking to the general public and promoting the industry and talking about the industry and educating people about what mineral exploration is, the importance of minerals in everyday life, all of those types of topics that folks in this industry are very familiar with. And now that transition to green minerals and green metals, and what that looks like, and the role that we can play in that. So, and then of course the educational piece that we do with all of our webinars and workshops, and Roundup, of course, being a large staple in that house.
So I wanted to ask you about Roundup. This is obviously we're having this discussion as part of the CSE's PreDAC. It's our 4th annual PreDAC, if you can believe it. And we're going into PDAC this year. And I don't know how you're feeling. I'm feeling sad. I'm missing my friends. And, it's such an amazing time for us all to get together and reconnect. Quite often, as someone was saying yesterday in one of the forums, you end up connecting with Vancouver people that you haven't seen in a long time, in Toronto. Tell us about Roundup, because you did the big leap and you did an online forum like PDAC's going to be this year. How did that work out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it worked out extremely well. I am honestly quite thrilled with how it worked out, and so thankful to our members for committing to it and for engaging. The level of engagement on the virtual platform was absolutely unbelievable, and that's what made it work at the end of the day. But it wasn't the same. I think we all missed seeing each other. I think we all missed being able to gather. I think that camaraderie that we have, and that social nature that we are in this industry, was certainly missed. And I'm sure it will come back at one point down the road. But in this world, we have to deal with challenges. Like I said, plan A never works, so you move on. And I think, you make the best of the situation that you're given, and a virtual platform this year was the way that we needed to go. But, there was a lot of nerves and a lot of uncertainties leading up into it, but really, really happy with the way it turned out. So looking forward to PDAC as well.
Is there any advice you give our listeners, as we're all coming into PDAC, not sure how this is going to look this year? Is there any advice from that experience you'd pass along?
Yeah, I think, the biggest piece is really to set up your profile, treat it like it's LinkedIn, put whatever information you can up there so that people know who you are when you're quote unquote walking around the show. And really take advantage of those opportunities to network and to engage with people, to send messages, even if they're, oh my goodness, I haven't seen you in 5 years. How are you doing? Like, you're still not seeing them, but at least you can reach out and talk to them. The other piece, I suppose, is that we all have Zoom accounts now, so take advantage of that, or Teams accounts, right? They're quite common, so take advantage of it. And if you start a message and say, oh my goodness, I haven't seen you in 5 years, why don't we join a Zoom call and make that connection that way? Again, it's not the same as in person, but it's as good as we can do right now. The other piece I would say is some of my best experiences and memories from Roundup this year were actually from the social events. We did a beer tasting event, which went on for about 3 hours. And at the end of the day, ended up with a bunch of geologists sitting around, getting up and grabbing rocks from shelves behind them and coming up and showing people, and go, oh, like, look at this one. And, twisting rocks around to show individual minerals within them. And it was just a hoot. That conversation was a really good one. And then we did an online poker tournament as well, which was a ton of fun. So I think anybody who took part in those really got that feel of engagement and seeing one another.
Well, that's amazing. Thank you for that. That's all super helpful. And I think, yeah, engage with this program as you would engage with PDAC. The one thing I'm not going to miss is when I have a meeting in the bottom floor in the investor presentation area. And then my next meeting is at the second cup at the other end. And you have to run and go up escalators and down escalators. So I won't miss that part. That's the only part I won't miss this year.
Or the high heels.
The high heels. I was going to say it. I can't feel toes by the end of PDAC. There are toes that have never been the same.
The shoes, I'm partially from the winter weather.
I know. Okay, I want to end off with finding out about AME, what's going on. I know that there's so many different initiatives that you've been working on over the past year, and you guys really have just killed it as far as accepting our new reality and moving forward on it. And I love that you guys are an advocate for the mining industry. I think that they deserve advocates. I think there's a lot of uphill battles that they have with varying groups and stakeholders, and they deserve their own advocate. So that's why I'm such a big fan of AME and the work that you guys do. Tell us about some of the stuff that you've been working on.
Yeah, so it's been an extremely busy year. And if I go back to this time last year, of course, the start of COVID, more or less, here in Vancouver. And we really hit the ground running as soon as we got back from PDAC in terms of what was happening, how it was going to affect the mineral exploration industry, how it was going to affect field camps, looking at some of the new policies and regulations and health orders that came out for our members and what that was going to mean for them. So we spent a lot of time throughout last spring really digging into that COVID advocacy piece and making sure that we were going to have a great and fantastic summer, productive summer, which we did. We ended up spending $422 million in the field last year collectively. So phenomenal number, one of the highest since 2013.
Everyone I talked to said that they had extended their normal time out there. So there wasn't a single company that I talked to that hadn't made their program a little bigger and hadn't spent more time than normal in the field, which just made me so happy.
Yeah, well, and then of course the financing's picked up into the fall time as well. So it ended up being a really great season for us. But then of course we transitioned into Roundup and really tried to take the bull by the horns and figure out how to do that. And I think we came out succeeding in what Roundup looked like, and the folks that attended, I think, had a great time from all the comments I've heard. But it's not only about Roundup, it's about all the other events. So we started up a webinar and workshop series that's going to continue into the fall. So tomorrow we have a town hall session for all of our professional members who belong to EGBC or any other professional association for that matter, on the new Professional Governance Act. So it's all changing. Our own professional duties and our code of ethics and all those things are changing. So we're going to go over that. Next Thursday, we've got a permitting workshop, hearing from government representatives on the best tips and tricks to get your permit application through the system most expediently. And then we're starting our Introduction to Exploration Safety workshop, which we do every single year, and it's always really well attended. And then coming up, we've also got a diversity and inclusion session. We've got a community engagement workshop coming up as well. So all kinds of things on that sort of networking, member engagement, learning, educational piece coming up. On the policy side, we have a policy survey out right now looking for comments from our members as to what the main policy issues are. Fully expect permitting to be top of that list. It has been for many, many years. But what we're also finding with government is that that's a top issue for them now. They have got the message loud and clear that permitting needs to be adjusted so that it's more timely and more efficient and more useful to everybody involved, including folks within government. So working hard on some of those initiatives, and then some of the financial incentives from flow-through shares and the deadlines associated with those, the Canadian exploration expenditures and what's really meant by that, and so some of the fine-tuning of what you're allowed to include as an exploration expense. So lots of policy and advocacy there. And then our membership, as you know, our membership committee or our marketing committee is working on some tools for membership right now, both around both sort of communication documents to talk to investors and to talk to community members during meetings around sort of what that mineral exploration cycle looks like, how it relates to mining, how it relates to prospecting, what the permitting cycle is, what the disturbance to the land could be when you're out doing a project, and the different stages of projects. And then our health and safety committee is also working on a number of membership tools around guidance around like use vehicles, helicopter safety, and then some mental and emotional safety pieces in camp as well. So there's a lot going on right now.
You guys are amazing. I'm such a fan of what you guys do, and that is way more than I thought that you'd have to answer. Okay,
It is a lot right now.
I'm putting you on the spot here, and hopefully that's okay, but you had mentioned an online forum that recently happened and suggested I go check it out. Will our audience have the ability to go find that as well? Is that public?
Anybody who registered for Roundup can
Okay.
go and see it. So it was the AME keynote session on diversity and inclusion at Roundup. It was a Friday lunchtime session. So yes, anybody who was registered for Roundup can go and see it. Anybody who didn't register for Roundup can still, if they would like to register for Roundup. All of our content is still available, including all the information that was at the booths and all of the presentations, all of the posters, all the academic posters. Everything is still available and will be for the next about 5 months or so.
Okay, so anyone listening, first of all, aside from this one video that Kendra told me about, go and check it out. I mean, what a great way to start off PDAC if you still have the ability to access all that information. The nice thing now with these online forums is we can do this on our own schedule and digest it at our own will, which is a great opportunity, I think, for all of us. But tell us a little bit about this video, because I want to encourage people. I mean, we're obviously having this discussion as part of a focus on women in mining. Tell us about this forum, because I'd love people to check it out.
Yeah, sure. So it was the AME keynote session, and we decided to focus on diversity inclusion, and specifically focusing on the race piece of diversity and inclusion in mineral exploration. So I set some guidelines for myself when I went out to find speakers, so that there was some level of common ground for the conversation. So I was specifically looking for geologists who were mid-career, who had worked in North America. And I wanted to find folks that were represented different races within our industry. So we had a Black geologist from Nevada, who was actually a mine engineer. We had a First Nation geologist from Manitoba, who lives in British Columbia. And then we had a female geologist from Toronto who was from, her background is from Trinidad. Her father's from Trinidad, her mother's from Manitoba. And then we had a British white gentleman on the panel as well. And so the conversation really was to be completely open and honest and ask some of the uncomfortable questions, both from a perspective of vulnerability and not knowing the right way to ask the questions, just to ask them and get them on the table and have that conversation. And then really to circle back on some of the experiences that people had in camp. And so part of the conversation was, it's weird to have a white British geologist on the panel because that's a pretty common person in this industry, just as a picture. But he happens to be a gay geologist. And so bringing in that conversation and having that having him come out throughout the session and then talk about some of the experiences in camp and some of the reactions that he had got in camp were quite powerful stories that sort of made people sit back and think. And likewise, the other three all had experiences. And one of the greatest stories actually was from the First Nation geologist who went back later in life to get her geology degree and then went back into camp. And her boss said, "Oh, fantastic. Now you can go into the community and do the community relations as a geologist, and you can talk all about the rocks and the geology." And she went, "Yeah, but I'm a geologist. I want to go to the field with the other geologists," which was, it made me step back and think, oh my goodness, I would have said the same thing. Here you have this person who fits this perfect mold that's a very needed and required role to have that geological experience and the knowledge and understanding of a community. But what I missed, and obviously what her boss missed as well, was the fact that she had gone and done the time and was really passionate about being a geologist, not a community liaison person. It didn't matter how perfect that niche was, it wasn't what she wanted, and nobody had ever asked her.
I got shivers, Kendra. That's, I encourage people to go check this out. And the reason I encourage, as Kendra said, the response to that keynote you said was the biggest response you've ever had. It moved people, that communication and the dialogue that came from that. So I, for sure, I'm going to check it out. I encourage other people to check it out and check out everything that happened at Roundup. I mean, Roundup is such a great forum. You guys have always done such a great job. I missed it this year. I really did. I miss seeing all of you guys. Kendra, I can't thank you enough for jumping on with me today. You're a true inspiration, and I think a wonderful representation, not only of a woman in mining, but of a person in mining. So thank you for continuing to be so inspiring.
Oh, thank you so much. And the same goes for you. I mean, I've watched your career over the last few years as well, and absolutely inspiring as well, and appreciate everything that you're doing with the CSE. So thank you so much. And thank you for being a volunteer. I cannot thank the volunteers enough. I mean, you just heard the slew of things that AME is working on, and there's no way we could do that without the fabulous volunteers that we have right across the board. So thank you for that. And thank you for having me today.
Yeah, well, it's an honor. Take care, Kendra. We'll talk to you hopefully during PDAC.
Sounds great. I look forward to it.
Okay.
Bye-bye.